Hello and welcome to Coco Knits. In this video, I am going to show you how I install zippers into knitwear. Whether you're using a machine or doing it by hand, I'll show you both ways. The steps are the same. I first pin it and then I baste it. This one I use my sewing machine and I'll show you that. And then the other one I used backstitch and hand stitched it in. This is my Flynn vest. This version is worked in a Verb for Keeping Warm lambkin yarn. And then this other version is bread and butter yarn. It's called Bun, and I also held a strand of something soft and fuzzy with it. It is a really fun thing to do, actually. I know it seems daunting, but knitted fabric is quite forgiving. So even if you don't do a perfect job, it works. It really does work. One of the notions that you are going to need is a zipper, and it needs to be a separating zipper. But what I want to say is absolutely do not worry about length. I am going to show you how you can shorten the zipper to whatever length you wind up needing. I wanted to use metal because the whole point of this vest to me was to have a not plastic fleece vest. So then to go and put a plastic zipper in it seemed wrong. But choose whatever kind of zipper you want. There's also there are nylon zippers. Then this is what I'm going to use for this video. And this is a number 3 antique brass separating zipper. Choose by color and size you want, and then we'll cut it down, no problem. This vest is size 2, and I guess what I actually ended up using was around 16 inches. So if you get something that is at least 18 to 20 inches, I think I had to go to, I think this might even be 24, but that's fine. That's fine. Longer is better. I will show you how we'll cut it down. All right, want to have some thread to sew this in. I did not go and buy thread. I'm going through my thread stash. And do lay your thread across, because the thread on the spool may not be the one you would think. I would have thought that maybe more of a gold, but the one that actually does not show at all is this brownish one. So choose your thread, and you do want a thread that matches your fabric, your knitting, not the tape. So ordinarily, when you're doing a completely hidden zipper, you would match these guys up and the zipper would be completely hidden under there. Because this is a metal zipper, I don't really want my knitting touching. I'm going to leave I'm going to try and aim to have it just come to the teeth and not over. The first thing you want to do is get some points established here before I separate and pin it in entirely. You want to decide where you want it to end. I don't want it hanging down below my fronts, so I am pushing it to where that little end down there is just above. The main thing is I want it centered. I don't want to separate this zipper and then pin in one side of it and then pin in separately the other side of it and then find that everything is off. So I'm going to get some pins set here just to make sure that my fronts match each other. And I'm clumsily placing these pins vertically because I am going to separate this zipper. So if I put them in horizontally, I wouldn't be able to get my zipper undone. So it's a little clumsy, but I just want to get this established so that they for sure match down here. And then the other spot I want to make sure I get matched up is so that my pockets match on either side. And then the top, we want to make sure that I've got it matching up here. Okay, so there are 3 main points pinned in. And now I'm going to carefully separate my zipper. So unzip it all the way down. And now I'm going to put some more pins in, but this time I can do it horizontally or vertically, doesn't matter. I'm trying to make it so that my knitted fabric just comes to the teeth, but not over. Okay, there's the first side done. So whether you are going to ultimately machine sew or whether you are going to hand sew it, I highly recommend that you baste it in first. Having these pins in here, you can see how it warps everything. Once we have this basted in, I can just get rid of those pins and I have a nice smooth line to sew, whether I'm going to ultimately hand sew this in or machine sew it in. And what I try and do is go not super close to the teeth. I want to be out here a little bit with things pinned in place. Now I'm just going to go and just go in and out. So when you're basting, if you can find a stitch, you know, there's sort of a knit stitch running up there, I'm going to try and just be consistent about going through the valley right next to it. In and out. And these are fairly big stitches. You're not sewing it in, you're just basting, which means you just want to get it to stay. And as you go, you can remove these pins. All right, I've got this side. Don't worry, it's not supposed to feel like it is sewn in. It's just basted. So it's just, that is just holding it there without the distortion of pins. Now I'm going to unthread this and just leave that hang there. And I'm going to go do the same thing on the other side. All right, so now I want to show you how we're going to cut the top off. I've got a little bit of thread threaded onto a needle and knotted. And then what you want to do is see how long you're going to need your zipper and go above that by a good, I mean, to be safe, you can even go up a couple of inches. And you're just going to cut right across it in between 2 teeth. And then what you want to do is figure out exactly where you want the top of that zipper to be. And I want it to be just about there. So I'm just going to fold my zipper at about a 45-degree angle and tuck it in so that when that collar folds over, it just, that little turn row is right at the top of where your zipper is going to end. Hang on to that. I've got my needle and thread ready, and I am just going to tack that. Just take a bunch of stitches, tack it vertically, and then maybe horizontally. And you just want to make sure that that is well secured so that your zipper cannot come up above this. So I'll just knot that off behind. And I will probably even count my little zipper teeth and do exactly the same thing on the other side. All right, so both of them are tacked like crazy. They're not going anywhere. And now I can trim this down more. And then we're going to tuck that right in there. And now I can finish basting, but what I'm going to do is catch the back of the collar and sandwich the zipper in there. All right, so I've got my zipper foot in and I'm lined up here, and you see how there's a V? Just pick sort of a valley. It's the same thing as seaming. Pick a valley and see if you can stay in it. It's not going to be perfect, so don't stress about it. Just kind of go fairly slow and work your way up. And again, I've got my matching thread in the top here. And this was the side that had the zipper, so up so far, and then I can zip it down out of the way. Okay, so I am up here to where I had folded the collar down. You have two options here. You can either undo that little bit of basting that you had back there and continue to machine stitch, or you can stop here with the machine and just go through both layers with leave a nice long tail of this thread and put it onto a sewing needle and finish this little bit here with a needle and thread by hand. You can see on the underside, I had my tape color fairly short, but this one I'm going to leave long enough to finish off a knot. All right, second side, same thing. I'm going to pick a valley and just keep in that valley all the way up as best I can. All right, I've hit that same spot. Trim my bobbin yarn and leave a nice long tail. Whew. Let's see how we did. All right, moment of truth. Make sure when you test this that you keep all your little threads out of the way. You don't want to zip them into the zipper. Even though it's scary to do on the machine, it's nice because it's done. And my basting line and my sewing line are pretty close together. To tell you the truth, I never take my basting out because it's a little bit more reinforcement, and it's not really going to show. I don't ever envision opening that up. If that bothers you, take it out. The other thing you can do is actually whip stitch the whole edge down if you want to be fancy, in order to give it some more stability. But I find this is usually just fine. All right, I've got my sewing thread back on my little needle, and we've got this little tail here. That is my original cast on. It's not going anywhere, so I'm just going to trim it down a bit and just hide it. Tuck it up inside my little casing, and I'm going to leave this because we can do that last little bit there. Basically what we want to do now is continue what I was doing with the machine, but go through both layers and the zipper and just take really fine stitches. You can also go up and then come back down, so you're actually stitching over the area twice. All right, so I stitched right along there up and back down, and now I can actually use the tail from my sewing bobbin to tie this off, do a few knots, and then I'll hide both of these threads. Feel like that's a pretty good knot. So now I'll just bring that up. And then I'll just finish these last few little doot doot doot. And again, hide that up in there and you'll have a nice clean edging. And then I'm going to do exactly the same thing over here on the other side. And then you can decide if you are going to weave your basting stitch in. And if you are, you've got to knot that off too and hide it. Or just, if you're going to take it out, just pull it out. All right, so the last thing is to just finish off the last couple of stitches there and just secure that to the back. And I'm not even going to really work it. Just going to, because you've got that sewn as well. Hide it in the casing. Trim that off. Pretty good. If you are going to hand sew this in, you're just going to go over again with your needle and thread, but very fine stitches and a little bit closer to the zipper teeth. All right, so stitching the zipper in by hand, what you want to do is, I did that thing where I hid the knot in between the zipper tape and fabric, and then I just came up and took a stitch. And what you want to do is use back stitch. You take a stitch forward, and then if you can have this so you can see the back as well, you want to go back a half a stitch, and you want to be working a scant 1/4 inch from your teeth. You want to give enough room for the zipper head to go up and down, but not so far that you can't see. Let's see, so back a half a stitch, go forward a whole stitch, and then you just look to the back and you go halfway between so that you fill in all the spaces. So again, if I go up, full stitch, and then just go backwards a half. So you just work your way up. And you can probably see examples of back stitch on something that's easier to see, but it's a nice secure stitch. And if it doesn't feel secure enough, you can do it again coming back down. And I also have my basting stitches in here, but you can see I'm going back to kind of fill in all those spaces. So that hopefully what you have, as long as you've been fairly consistent, hopefully what you have is what looks like a line of stitching going all the way up. And this is why having it basted in is great, because I'm not worried about placing it. I'm just worried about getting my stitches in anything that resembles a straight line. But yeah, that's it. Just back stitch your way up, and that should hold it in. Like I say, if it feels not secure enough to you, go ahead and do the same thing coming back down. The other thing you can do is, once you've finished going up this way, is rather than come back down with a back stitch again, you can take out your basting. I mean, my basting is a hot mess too. And just whip stitch this edge down to the back of your knitting. All right, so I'm slowly making my way up this side. Doing it on the machine is scarier, but it's faster. I think I am going to whip stitch the back of this because it wants to flip up. I'm going to take out my basting and I'll just do a quick whip stitch down there. What I'm going to do up here when I get to the overlap is you can either stitch this down, then stitch this to the back, or you can do both layers at once. At any rate, you want to sandwich that guy in there. All right, so I am right up here, just about at my fold, and I've decided to I am just going to sew it in the rest of the way up here. And then I will fold that down and catch my back of the collar separately. All right, so I am up at the top. Fold my collar over. Just make sure, I know it's sort of hard to see, but try and get it on that fold line. And then I'm going to come through and catch the back. But again, I don't want to put it so far forward that it keeps my zipper from going up. And I'm just using a running stitch here. It's just to tack it to the back. But now what I'm going to do is I've taken out my basting stitch, and I am going to take this yarn that I've got here anyway and just do a little whip stitch just to keep this the zipper tape onto the back of my sweater or the vest. Just whip stitch it down because it's wanting to flip up. And this you could do in thread the color of your tape, and then it wouldn't show as much, because what I am whip stitching this to is that I cord, and the I cord would not show on the front of the vest. So if I wanted this to not show, I could also do it in more of an ivory color. So that's it. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, and then we'll just finish up a few more little things and we'll be done. All right, here it is. It's in. It may not be the prettiest thing you've ever seen. Hopefully yours looks nicer, but that's okay. I whip stitched the tape down after doing back stitch all the way up, and it's in. The moment of truth. Whether you hand sewed or machine stitched your zipper in, hopefully you've learned that it's not so scary and it really is quite forgiving. Thank you so much for joining us.